The year of returning mucus. Come on, man. I can't follow that.
I own it.
What is that on the Chinese calendar?
Snake.
Snake. I can identify, actually, for the past, I don't know, a few weeks, I thought I was having congestive heart failure. Yeah, and I don't even know what congestive heart failure is, but that's what it felt like. And then I found out it was heartburn. My doctor is very patient with these false alarms. He treats me sort of like an annoying child. So I'm grateful to find that out anyway. It's not congestive heart failure. Anyway, this is a story. It's sort of one of my apartment stories, and this one is set in Los Angeles. Let me see if I can get this on eyes. It's called Victor and Me. I met Victor through Craigslist. It's a true story, by the way, nonfiction. The only genre defined by what it is not. It's also non-poetry. I move easily among these non-genres. It's called Victor and Me. I met Victor through Craigslist. I had come to LA to spend a couple of months of winter, maybe longer, and I was looking for a room. Something quiet where I could get some writing done, with little outdoor space to sit in the sun and imagine how cold it was in New York. When I pulled up to Victor's place in my rented Taurus, I knew I had found the spot. It was a 1950s Silver Lake bungalow atop a street lined by palm trees. A wiry little guy in a sock hat came out and waved me in. Right away, I had a good feeling about him. He was intense, but interesting, bubbling over with ideas about art and philosophy. I moved in that night, and we stayed up late, drinking and talking. Soon we were hanging out together quite a bit. I didn't know many people in LA, and Victor seemed to have burned a few bridges. He rented a guest house in back to a sweet-natured lump named Joran, and I got the idea that he and Victor had been good friends once. Now Joran shared the guest house with Helga, a beautiful, aspiring actress. According to Victor, she didn't pay rent. Joran just liked having her around. And he's not even fucking her, Victor told me, sounding disgusted about the whole arrangement. So that led Victor and me to one another. A few nights a week, we'd get some beers and take his vintage Cutlass for a spin, stopping to play pool in Echo Park or just drive up and down Sunset, Victor taking a pull off his flask and drumming the dashboard while I dug the warm night air. I truly liked him, thought he was the real deal, an edge character for sure, but a seeker, which is a rare thing these days. There were, however, increasingly unsettling aspects of living with him. For one, he began to imitate my daily routine. I exercised in my room every morning, and within a few days, I began to hear Victor in his room, grunting his way through a workout, doing push-ups or skipping rope. Nothing like starting the day with intense activity, he told me, coming out of his room soaked in sweat. You should try it. I also read in the evenings in the small front room, setting up candles and a glass of wine on a TV tray, while Victor watched Kung Fu DVDs in the living room. A week after I moved in, I found Victor in the front room with a book in his lap, candles and a glass of wine on the TV tray next to him. I used to read here all the time, he said. I realized I needed to get back to that. As time went on, I was also more reluctant to sit around and drink with Victor. He got maudlin when he drank. Once, after several hours of booze and talking, he leaned his head back, stared at the ceiling, and began to sob. Then he sat up, took a gulp of wine, and gave me a wild look, as if he was thinking of cracking the bottle over my head. After that, I began going to bed earlier. One morning I woke up to a light rain and saw Victor pacing around the front yard, hands on hips, eyeing the base of the house. It turned out the foundation was sketchy, and whenever it rained, the house was in danger of sliding down the street. The guest house was slowly sinking into the ground. Apparently, Victor didn't have the money to fix the problem, so all he could do was pace around the yard, cursing the rain. Money was an issue for Victor. He was an out-of-work movie grip and spent most of his day calling people about leads on jobs. That morning, after the rain had stopped, he came bouncing into my room with a manic grin, telling me about a gig he'd just scored. "Here's the thing," he told me. "I need some clean urine because these scumbags are going to test me. You mind if I borrow yours?" The request caught me off guard. I mumbled something like, "Okay," before I realized what he was asking. Then, before I could clarify the situation, he gave my shoulder a squeeze, said, "Thanks, brother," and bounded back to his room. I thought of following after him and telling him that, in fact, I was a little uncomfortable with the idea, but I could hear him on the phone by then, all hopped up, telling his buddy he was going to take the job. Later in the day, after Victor left, packing a small Chivas bottle filled with my urine, I was sitting on the back steps of the house, wondering whether this scenario might blow back on me somehow. Suddenly, Helga, Joran's roommate, stepped out of the guest house in a bathrobe and heels. Then she tottered across the lawn, handed me a little camera, and asked me if I mind photographing her. Something about a foot model job, the internet, I wasn't sure what. It was hard to concentrate because she had ditched the robe and was standing in front of me now in nothing but skimpy underwear, asking for suggestions on a good spot to shoot. "Something that shows off my body," she said matter-of-factly. I was in the middle of a quintessential LA experience. This kind of thing never happened to me in New York. Before I knew it, I was seeing pictures of Helga perched on a lawn chair, sitting on the picnic table and leaning against the garage door. Despite my best efforts, however, I wasn't able to convert the Dear Penthouse scenario into a genuine hookup. Helga was all business. The only hint of sex I got from her was when we were done, and she was putting on her robe. "Now you have something to think about when you write today," she said, giving me a wink. Then she tottered back to the guest house. Within seconds, I was in my room, jerking off like a teenager. That night, Victor came back late, slamming the door and stomping into my room, chugging from a bottle of wine. "A whole job ruined by some New York bitch," he said. "What happened?" "Miserable hag wanted me to work till midnight on a photo shoot for some actress's house. I told her I was done for the day, and she starts balking about my money, saying the job wasn't finished and she would never work with me again. And I slaved for her. She better send me my check too, or I'll follow her back to New York and cut her fucking throat. Meanwhile, check this out," he said, and pulling a big telephoto lens from his parka. "You took that?" "Yeah, they're not going to know. They have so much crap." "So what did you do all day besides sitting around in your sweatpants?" "Well, I had a little photo shoot of my own with Helga. I took pictures of her in her underwear in the backyard for a modeling job." "No shit." "Yeah." "Why you?" he said, sounding pissed. "I don't know. I was here." "I knew she was hot. Did you fuck her?" "What? Did you fuck her?" "No." "You didn't fuck her?" "No, it wasn't that kind of vibe." "It wasn't that kind of vibe? What does that mean?" "It just wasn't that kind of energy. She's walking around in her panties in the backyard." "I'm telling you, it wasn't that kind of thing. If you'd have been there, you would have seen. If I'd have been there, I would have fucked her on the picnic table." "Trust me, it wasn't like that. I know women. I fucking know women," he said, stomping out of the room and slamming the door behind him. "I know them enough to fuck them when they're asking for it." He called out, marching down the hallway. The next thing I heard was the Cutlass engine revving in the carport, then tires squealing down the driveway. After Victor left, I realized I hadn't had a chance to ask him about the urine sample. I began to wonder if there was some way they could use it to trace the stolen lens back to me. Did they DNA test for a telephoto lens? And who knows what else he did. That's when the phone rang in Victor's room and his machine picked up. "Victor, this is Marcia Temple," an angry voice announced. "You cost a lot of people a lot of money today, and they are not happy about it. My advice to you is rectify the situation, and you know what I mean." She called back 2 or 3 times, leaving even more angry messages, but I couldn't tell if she knew about the missing lens. When I went to bed, Victor still hadn't come home. Meanwhile, I had decided that maybe it was time to get back to New York. The next morning, I told him that I didn't think I'd be staying past the end of the month. "Whatever," he said, not lifting his head from the newspaper. We didn't talk much for the couple of weeks before I left. The calls for Marcia Temple eventually tapered off, so I didn't feel the need to pursue that. Victor told me he'd have to inspect my room from top to bottom before I'd get my security deposit, and it'd probably be a while anyway, since I was leaving on short notice. I didn't make an issue of it. I had the feeling that when all was said and done, he'd do the stand-up thing. When the van to the airport rolled up in front of the house on my last morning, I went to look for Victor. I wanted to say my goodbyes and maybe put a positive cap on the experience. I found him on the back steps, hunched over the phone, dialing around for other jobs. I thought of tapping him on the shoulder and giving him a wave, then noticed how tensely contorted his body looked, and thought better of it. Instead, I went inside, grabbed my things, and left. A light rain had started by the time I loaded my stuff into the van. As we pulled away, I looked out the rear window to see Victor in the front yard, pacing around, hands on hips, eyeing the foundation of the house. Thank you.